Welcome to the Johnny Dell Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to answer the whys and hows of the game by talking through and dissecting game film and diving deeper to explain why the X's zig and the O's zag. I am Adam Marino, joined by Mr. Johnny Dell, and we are reminding you, as always, the most fun way to watch is on YouTube, where we go live. There you can comment into the live show. Be sure to hit the notification bell and turn on your notifications so you can be a part of the conversation. We also stream live on Facebook and X. Also, the audio versions are always found on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, if you are live with us in the chat, it's probably because you are subscribed, you've hit the notification bell, and turned those notifications on. So, when sharing with your friends, be sure to let them know. We also love to hear from you outside of our live show. Email us at johnnydellsfootballacademy@gmail.com, and you can always check out the website jfa49.com, as it is the most fun way to support the channel. Also, the way we boost the chat and boost the algorithm is to type out hashtag JD49. Yes, JD49. We got some of the usual suspects like Quiffleball and Don't Bother Me. Everyone, what is happening is the Johnny Dale Football Academy podcast. This is the shirt I chose to wear. Forgot how bright it was, but that is okay. Johnny, how was your weekend? I'm excited to talk about the San Francisco 49ers.
Yes, it's good to be back. I was gone again last week. On Friday, I was out of town. I was camping with my family. We're getting a little vacation getaway. First time since actually I did a show live on vacation. We did a pre-game show last year. I think it was that October or September? I think it was October last year. So it was really good to get away and get some time to refresh, and thankfully had some favorable Alabama weather come in. So, yeah.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so I know we're going to talk defense. What I want to ask you is, what is your measurables? What are you going off of? Because I love that, Michael's already saying, well, we do, obviously. We have the best defense. I get it, but this is the whys and hows. We're really going to get into it. But I want to ask you, what are your, how are we doing this is basically what I'm asking.
Well, so we're going to go just position by position and kind of rank the positions, position groups, and see who kind of comes out on top. When you look at the 49ers, it's a hard group to fully evaluate because there was so much in and out of the lineup last year, and there's going to be a lot of changes, especially along the defensive line. So really we have to look at a combined, what did this group do last year, because you're only as good as your last game. The 49ers might be expected to be much better in 2025, but as of right now, they're only as good as they were in 2024. We can expect them again, project them to be better, but the last place they left off is where we know. And it doesn't matter what you did in 2023 as far as your defense, it's what you did in 2024. But we do have to at least take some sort of account of the changes of Robert Saleh coming in and really being a big boon and boost to this defense. We're going to look at some of the areas where I expect them to be better because of Robert Saleh. Because when you look at this 49ers defense last year, really strong in some numbers that are metrics for how we rank overall defense. Really, really poor in some others. And things that over Robert Saleh's tenure, they were strong in. And so we're going to see that and say, okay, where do we expect this to get better? And then look at that in comparison to the rest of the NFC West, because even with, some of the proposed changes that people would have, it is still the clearest and fastest and best path to the playoffs is winning your division. And the best pathway to winning your division is beating your division opponent. So if you have the best defense in your division, you most likely will be a playoff team. That is most likely what's going to happen. And so, and we're going to take a look at that. But that's how we're going to walk through it.
Okay, now let me ask you this. Are we looking internally first or externally?
We're going to look externally first. We're going to look at the opposing defenses and see what they have lined up, and then we can then compare that to the 49ers, see where do they slot in there and grade them. And we're going to grade them on the fly. I just got to make a spot here for that grading to happen. My computer ended up inadvertently restarting right before the
I love that.
this episode
I
went
always love
live.
that.
So thankfully it recovered my notes. But I have to make a couple adjustments. I was almost about to cry when I lost my notes. But also wanted to say a huge happy anniversary to my wife. We are celebrating today our 13th wedding anniversary, not the unlucky number. It is the baker's dozen, or because you guys know I like history. Here's a good little factoid for you about history.
All right.
Most people assume that Napoleon Bonaparte was a very short man, and it's been theorized that he suffered from short man syndrome, where he's trying to constantly make up for his height, because he's often been called 5'3", because that's what his measurements were from where he grew up and when he enlisted in the military. But he actually grew up in an area of France and lived in an area of France where a foot was measured at 13 inches. So Napoleon Bonaparte has been called 5'3" and a really short man. He was actually 5'8", which is actually at the time the average height. So he was completely average in height. He wasn't short for the time in any way, shape, or form. I am 5'8", so I res with Mr. Napoleon. So there you go. It is the certain areas of France. The old foot measurement is the anniversary we're on. We're on the 13th anniversary. I don't see it as unlucky. It's baker's dozen or Napoleonic foot. That's how I see it. So, but big,
I love that
anniversary to the wifey, and that's another little factoid you can use at a cocktail party somewhere. But enough.
Or you don't have to.
Hey, look, I would. I just did. So let's dive into this. Start ranking the 49ers and these different position groups. We're going to start it with the defensive line. So when we look around the NFC West defensive line, the Rams got a good defensive line. You look at who they got there. They're bringing back pretty much their entire defensive line. It's a young defensive line. It was a productive defensive line that they were able to really, make some noise. When you look at the amount of sacks that they had, when you look at the amount of pressures they had, they were a good defensive line that really led the defense as far as to some of their rankings. When you look at points allowed, they were one of the better teams in points allowed. They were 17th in the league. They weren't the best, but they were 17th. So they're right in the middle of the pack. They had an okay defense, but really the strength of their defense was their defensive line. And so when you look at them, they have Byron Young, Braden Fisk, somebody I was really high on coming out of that draft, Kobe Turner, and Jared Verse. Jared Verse, much a lot of accolades there. We know what he brings. Braden Fisk had a phenomenal rookie year, was very strong. Byron Young was a guy I was really high on coming out of the Senior Bowl, and he's been a really good complement there with Jared Verse. And Kobe Turner has just been a solid guy. He hasn't been anything absolutely spectacular or anything, but he's been a solid guy. Hasn't been really a weak spot on that defensive line. So, if I was grading the Rams defensive line, I would give him a B+.
Yeah, I think one thing to think about the defense is I heard this, that they were the youngest defense and they had the least amount of penalties, which is very odd that you don't see that. Usually the younger you are, the more penalties you're going to have, but it speaks to how good the defense is, and the line is definitely a part of that. The Rams on
So I'm
defense
gonna
scare
have to
me.
bring a little fact check there. The Rams were actually 19th in penalties. They had 113 penalties.
On the defensive side?
Yes, team defense.
Well, I don't know where I heard. I think
the team that was actually number one as far as team defensive penalties was the 49ers.
Of the least amount, you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had the fewest amount of team defensive penalties in the league at 79.
Well, that shows how good Colin Cowherd is. Because now I remember that's where I heard it. And he is such a homer.
That's what you get for listening to Colin Cowherd. Now it may be overall. You're looking at overall penalties, both offensive and defensive. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'm just looking at penalties committed by team and accepted. And the 49ers were number one in that category, and the Rams were 19th. Look, they are a young defense, but they are definitely led by their defensive line. That is the strongest group for them. I would give them a B+.
Okay.
If we move on, you're going to give them an A. Is that what you said?
No, not B. I'm fine with B+. I mean,
okay. If we move on, then the Seahawks, you have Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy II, Jaron Reed, and Derek Hall. When we look at really who their front four is going to be, to me, when I look at the Seahawks, I say it's an okay, nothing outstanding group. Leonard Williams has his entire career flashed moments, but he's never been consistent. And he's been somebody that, even when we played them last year, I remember a couple reps he had against Trent Williams where you just went, wow, nobody does that to Trent Williams. And he was. Now, some of that was Trent missing training camp, being a little bit out of shape and being a little bit rusty there. But, Leonard Williams is somebody that I wouldn't sit there and say, okay, if I was to grade, I would say, give him a B. He's a potential A- player, a potential C player. And he's going to be very rangy in there. Jaron Reed, I think, has just been always kind of underwhelming versus his potential and what was expected out of him. Byron Murphy II is just a dude. He's just a guy. And Derek Hall, same thing, just a guy.
Here's a guy.
Yeah, I mean, now when you look at their overall defense and what the Seahawks were able to do last year, they were a decent team as far as defense. When you look at their pass defense, they were around 10th in the league as far as amount of yards allowed passing. They only allowed 3,603 yards passing. I think overall that was a lot of scheme and decent play over the kind of I would say most of the Seahawks defense we're going to give about a B to a B-. They didn't really have any C group. They didn't have any A group. They had a really solid scheme. They had an okay everything, and that kind of helped them in a lot of ways. But you look at like their quarterback pressure percentage, that was actually really good. It was third best in the league, only behind the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cleveland Browns. When you look at their pressure percentage, it starts to drop a little bit. But their quarterback or knockdowns per pass attempt, that was really good. It was third in the league. When you look at which is the amount of times they're knocking a quarterback down for every time. So they were able to get to the quarterback and hit him at a high rate. But when you start seeing, pressures, it's not there as much. So they were, a lot of that, again, that speaks to scheme. That's them scheming up free rushers at times, but not able to win consistently with their front four. So I give them a B- is what I'm going to give their defensive line. I don't think they do anything really well. They just do a lot of things okay. What do you think about that, Adam?
Michael Norris agrees. He said that a couple minutes ago. Sounds like a B- line. So yeah, don't disagree there. I have a side note question that I want your opinion on with rushing the passer. So sacks have been an official stat only since the late 70s, early 80s, I believe, is when that became an official
I don't remember
stat.
the exact date it came in.
Yeah, but overall kind of recent as far as what stats are. I'm curious if you think that a hurry or like it's not an official, stat, but like Bosa, Crosby, Watt, these three names come to mind as like they have to be up there in leading the league in. And I wonder if that's because you even speak to that when some people say on social media, well, Bosa's sacks are down. And then you show the film where, hey, if these stats were officially recorded, he would have over 20 a year of hurries or whatever. Is that something that you think will be ever like really looked at, especially we can judge with like with our eyes as far as quarterback takes a 3-step drop, he doesn't make the throw and has to make an abnormal, you can say abnormal move. And now that because there's someone in his proximity, that can be classified as a, as a hurry or whatever. Or is that too like, no, it's too, that's too much of a judgment call or that kind of thing. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I mean, hurries and pressures are different, and they are two different metrics. Hurries have to do with a player being within a certain distance from the quarterback when he throws the ball, or before the quarterback leaves the pocket. That would be considered a hurry. A pressure is then within, I think it's within an arm's length of the quarterback. So there's that, and it has to be under 3 seconds, I believe, to be a pressure. So there's a hurry, and then there's a pressure, and then there's the knockdowns, and then there's the sacks. The biggest reason they started even including any of these, because these have been stats that teams have unofficially used for a long time, and because they it's part of their metric tracking. As you said, like Nick Bosa leads the league oftentimes in hurries and pressures, but doesn't always lead the league in sacks. That's where coaches use that as a valuation metric and to see where their players performing. If a guy doesn't have a lot of sacks, but he's getting a huge amount of hurries, a lot of times coaches will value those more because again, you'll be able to they'll look at, okay, when you get a drive and there's 2 hurries on that drive, what is the likelihood that drive will end in no points for the offense? They have those kind of metrics, and how often is if you get a hurry, what's the turnover rate? If you get a sack, what's the turnover rate? And knowing that turnovers matter more in a game than a drive that doesn't end in points, turnovers are one of the strongest metrics to if you win or lose. You're going to see that, and you're going to see how that affects. So coaches have tracked these things for a long time. I don't think we're ever going to get it as an official stat. It just kind of helps with the overall evaluation of the game when we can see that side of it. So I don't think it's going to become an official stat like sacks. Sacks are very easy to measure.
Yeah.
The guy tackled the quarterback or he didn't, when he had the ball. That's really easy to measure. If you're talking about, judging hurries and pressures and knockdowns, that starts getting a little murky, and it's going to change. That's why tackles for a long time haven't been an official stat, because, are you counting combined? When you're talking combined tackles, if a guy jumps on the pile at the very last second, you can be quoted or given a combined tackle, but there's 4 other guys who got there before him. So it's one of those stats that there's different ways teams, because some teams won't count that, some teams will. I remember Patrick Willis's rookie year, the 49ers had credited him with 225 tackles, and I think his official stat line on that year is like 180, but the 49ers gave him 45 more tackles than the stat keeper. So it changes, and different teams will measure different ways. Anyways, we'll keep moving on. The Cardinals next. The Cardinals have an interesting defensive line because it's very much changing. It's they brought Calais Campbell back from the Dolphins. They went and drafted Walter Nolan. Outside of that, they have a couple guys who were really unproven last year and weren't super productive, and Dante Still and Zaven Collins, not household names at all. But when you do look at what the Cardinals were able to do last year, as far as some of their passing game metrics, at least, they were pretty solid. You look at the yards allowed, they were a little bit better than middle in the league. When you look at the amount of hurries that they generated, they were let me make sure I have my numbers right on here. It's the right in order. They were, again, about middle of the league. When you look at Sacks, they were middle of the league. When you look at pressures, they were middle of the league. Like, they didn't do anything terrible as a defensive line as far as, passing game, but they were just kind of, again, no household names. But when you start looking at Calais Campbell, you start to go, okay, does Campbell still have something left in the tank? And I think, again, this is another one that Jonathan Gannon runs a really solid scheme, and he's not an easy guy to get stuff on. There was a reason why the Eagles defense was so good under him. And so there's part of that scheme. Can Calais Campbell have something left in the tank, and can he teach young Walter Nolan some things? Walter Nolan, a guy that many 49ers fans really, really wanted. I wasn't as high on him. I think he's going to have a lot of real flashy plays, but he's going to be a liability on a bunch of plays. So when I just look at two guys who really not much there, Calais Campbell, I don't think there's going to be that much left in the tank, honestly.
He'll be a leader. He'll be a leader.
He'll be a locker room leader, but I don't think the production is going to be off the charts, especially when guys start getting older and they've had some injuries throughout their years. And they're as tall as he is, that bend and that hip flex and everything that he was able to make up for early in his career will start becoming more of a liability now. He's going to have a harder time sinking, a harder time staying low. He knows a lot of stuff. It's just sometimes the body doesn't want to respond. And where he's at with his career, I don't think he's going to have a whole lot left in the tank. I think their defensive line has to be anchored by Walter Nolan. And just for me, I'm not that impressed. I'm going to give them a C+ for their defensive line. That's what I think they're going to be in their ranking. If we move on to the 49ers, just so we can get through all these groups, we start out number 11th overall pick, Michael Williams. He's going to be a starter. He's going to be there. Second round pick, Alfred Collins, expected to be a starter. The 49ers are very much rebuilding this defensive line. You look, then it's going to be kind of a two-way rotation there between, I think, Jordan Elliott and Bryce Huff. I think that's how it's going to be at the beginning of the year. Jordan Elliott is going to be out there. I know a lot of us want to see our other young kid, CJ West, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be Jordan Elliott. They're not going to throw three rookies out there on the defensive line. I just don't see it happening.
That's a lot. Yeah.
But Bryce Huff, the big addition who brings a ton of speed off the edge as a situational rusher, you have to consider him as part of that defensive line, and then anchored by the absolute stud Nick Bosa. So I think that's somebody that Nick Bosa, when you look at the 49ers issues last year, missing Nick Bosa for so much of the year is a huge part of that. Is a massive part of that. It's not even a little part of it. When we're talking about one of the top 3 defensive players probably in the league, a former defensive player of the year, that makes a big, big difference. Because when you look at the 49ers' pass defense, yards allowed, when we just look at yards gained via passing, the 49ers were 5th in the league. So they were top 5 in yards gained per passing. When you look at their hurry percentage, they were 32nd, 31st, 30th, 29th, 28th, 27th, 26th, 25th in the league. So those two metrics are way out of balance. That's saying you have guys that can coverage. You're not giving up a lot of yards passing, but you rarely, if ever, get to the quarterback. To put it in perspective, their hurry percentage was 6.5%. Top in the league, 12.4%. The Rams, 9.7%. They were 3rd in the league. So you're talking 3 out of every 100 dropbacks, or 1 out of basically an extra hurry a game that the Rams are getting, which, again, can be game-changing plays. When you look at just sacks, the 49ers were not good. They were, let's make sure I got the metrics here right. We were about 25th in the league. When you look at pressure percentage, it's bad. Pressure percentage, just a little bit better than the Cardinals. Again, about 24th, 25th in the league. Overall pressures, we were 27th in the league. Bulk pressures. It was so. In every pass rushing metric, we're in the bottom 3rd of the league. In overall yards and passing, top 5. That again speaks to the absence of Nick Bosa. And so he is a huge part of why this defense was struggling last year, his absence there, and then just not having any other juice there. Bryce Huff brings a ton of juice there. You add in some kids who, again, bring a lot of potential there. When you look at overall turnovers that the 49ers had, it was bad. I mean, they just did not force a lot of turnovers. They weren't good at it. They were tied for 10th worst in the league. So, I mean, which was like a 8-way tie, but they only had 17 turnovers. Leading the league was the Pittsburgh Steelers with 33. So, you know, they didn't force a lot of turnovers. And again, that comes down to you're not getting the hurries, you're not getting the pressures, not leading to those negative plays. So I look at going into this season, I fully expect the 49ers. I think maybe this is a little bit optimistic. Maybe I'm being a little too harsh. Let me know in the chat that I think the 49ers defensive line, I would give them a B+. We know that Nick Bosa is an A+ player. We know that. These other guys are just unproven. And so I believe that Michael Williams will be a phenomenal player. I believe that Alfred Collins will be a phenomenal player. I believe Bryce Huff is going to have a huge year as far as production-wise. They have the potential to be a solid A group, but they're unproven. So while I know Nick Bosa is an A+, everybody else I'm going to have to give them a B because I don't know. They can go anywhere from C- to A+. And so I'm going to give the 49ers a B+ on their defensive line. Let me know what you think in the chat. What do you think about that, Adam? Am I being too harsh? Am I being too fair?
So, yeah, that's a good question. I'm with Michael Norris again. He says I'd give them a B because of the unproven side. If I were only to pick one or two, as far as are you being too harsh or overly like optimistic, I would on a hair say overly optimistic, just by a hair. And I don't fault you for that, as this is our favorite team. This is the one time where you would be allowed to do that, as you're hoping that it's that. But Eric Salzman says certainly can't be worse than last year. And there's three major factors. Here's 3 major factors, Eric. Salah, the schedule, and these rookie players can play. We have documented this a ton on this very program, that these that we said whoever was drafted, we were going to be excited because we knew that there was so many really good defensive players in the draft. So those are 3 factors that come to mind very easily.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right there. If we move on to linebacker, we'll move for these a lot quicker. The defensive line being one of the being the largest single group of players, because I'm splitting safeties and corners up. If we look at linebackers, the Rams, Troy Reeder and Omar Spates. I don't think either of those guys really. Troy Reeder I think he was maybe a little overrated. I know that's even hard to say with a guy like Troy Reeder, but you know, he made a number of plays. I just think that there's some deficiencies there in his game that are going to. He looked a little bit better because of their strong defensive line. As far as him as a player, I don't value him real high. Omar Spates, that's somebody that they believe in pretty strongly internally, as far as from what I've heard from different people inside the Rams. I'm not sold on him. He was one of the reasons they were willing to trade Ernest Jones away, or they would let him go. The other part was that Ernest Jones just refused to show up in shape. Ernest Jones had shown up 10 pounds overweight throughout his time with the Rams this last year through off season, and that's one of the reasons they let him go. Now then he went to the Seahawks. He kind of had a little resurgence there. Ernest Jones brings a lot of speed, but I don't think he's going to be asked to be the Fred Warner of that defense, or the CJ Mosley of that defense, or Roquan Smith of that defense. And I just don't think he has it. I don't think he has that level. And so this year there was that kind of surge because of, almost like the revenge body sort of thing that happens. Rams let me go. I'm going to get in great shape and really show them and everything. Well, that happens 1 year. Usually, though, when guys have these kind of issues where they just can't stay in shape and they can't stay disciplined on it. It's after that initial surge there, it disappears. So I don't think Ernest Jones there with the Seahawks is going to be the guy. And then they just have a couple guys, Tyrese Knight and Echene Nwosu Boye Mafe, that either both of those guys, again, I just don't see them as any sort of blue chip talent. They're just kind of players that can be taken advantage of. And they're going to ask a lot of that very inconsistent defensive line in front of them to help them, and then a lot of scheme. I give the Rams a C+ for their linebacker group. Maybe I'm being a little harsh there. I am not a believer in Troy Reeder or Omar Spates, and I give the Seahawks a B- for their group. I'm not a believer in either one of their groups. When we look at the Cardinals, it's Mac Wilson and Akeem Davis Gaither. I'm not impressed. What I saw of them from last year, and they're trying to again rebuild that linebacker core. I'm going to give them a solid C.
I was going to say that,
not impressed with the Cardinals linebacker core. I think again they were helped by some things around in their schedule and with the NFC West as far as some offenses. I'm just not a believer. So I give the Cardinals a C there. I think overall the NFC West outside of the 49ers is very weak at the linebacker core. There's nothing there that makes me go, ooh, I'm worried. And so when we jump to the 49ers, obviously very much like the defensive line group, it starts out with an absolute all-pro blue chip player in Fred Warner, slowed down by the fractured ankle last year, ton of missed tackles. Really showed up, and we saw that in the drop off. Those first 5 games of the year, Fred was just looking at a phenomenal year. I mean, it was looking at maybe the first linebacker who could challenge off-ball linebacker for defensive player of the year since Luke Kuechly.
We talked about it. We did.
And then there was a big drop off, and obviously it was the injury to the ankle. He still had a great year, even behind that struggling defensive line and that defensive line that missed Nick Bosa. So when you see Fred Warner, obviously he's an A+ caliber player, and that's going to drag this whole group up. He's that blue chip player that is head and shoulders. I mean, it is not even close to the next guy in the NFC West. It's not even close.
Right.
And so then you look at that, it's a lot of young guys, unproven guys. You have D winners, and then I think it's going to be one of Nick Martin or Tatum Bethune. That's going to be a big competition to look at through training camp is Nick Martin and Tatum Bethune. Tatum Bethune, I love the way he feels. I love his run defense. A lot to learn as far as nuances of the coverage game. Nick Martin, love the speed he brings. Love the physicality he brings. Can he stay healthy at his size? He's an undersized linebacker. He's probably working right now to put on a little bit of mass to protect himself a little bit, but trying to do it without losing that thing that makes him really special, which is speed. So when we look at the 49ers, we have a lot of young, high potential guys. But if Fred Warner's not in this group, I have to say it's a C group or a C+ just because it's so unproven. D Winters had a lot of flashy plays, couldn't stay on the field last year.
Right.
Curtis Robinson. Curtis Robinson, I loved how he played in preseason last year, but he's coming off an ACL tear. He never saw any live game action during the season. I think he's somebody who has a huge potential there. Jalen Graham, he could be in there, but I don't want to see him on the field. There's a reason the 49ers let him go to another team, to their practice squad, to the Eagles' practice squad. They only brought him back because of all the injuries to the linebacking core and Dre Greenlaw. And so if this was last year and you're looking at Dre Greenlaw being there with Fred Warner, this is a solid A+ group, but it's not right now. So I think, Fred pulls that group up there. I'm going to give him a B. I think, with Fred Warner, you can't give this group less than a B.
That's fair.
He's that good.
He's A++.
He's that good.
So that averages out.
But so it averages out. And so even when you look at that, the 49ers still have the best linebacking core in the NFC West.
Right, which is kind of crazy. Speaks to how bad, the rest of the core is across our league or division. But yeah, I give Johnny so far a B- on that segment for saying Curtis, my favorite Martin. Shout out to Chris Berman.
Look,
those years in the 90s of him saying Curtis, my favorite Martin, was pretty good. Shout out to Chris Berman, who's still going strong. The only employee of ESPN since its existence has been there the whole time.
Which is a pretty good achievement.
Yeah.
That's going to be the way we do it.
The Swami.
But if we move on to safety, the Rams, they got Quentin Lake and Cam Curl. A couple guys, they have some range, but they're really aggressive. They jump on stuff, they guess, and so they can be taken advantage of. We saw it last year when we played the Rams in the games we played them. We were able to go after their safeties a number of times. They're guys that can be taken advantage of. Seahawks, Kobe Bryant and Julian Love. I think they're one of the more steady Eddie safety groups, but again, can be taken advantage of. Julian Love was somebody that George Kittle just absolutely ate his lunch last year. So when I look at how they kind of fare out, I grade them both the same, which is at a B. Again, nothing great, but also these aren't like bottom feeder players that you can really take advantage of. The Cardinals, I think this is the strength of their defense, really. When you look at, they got Budda Baker, who again is a blue chip player. He's even at where he's at in his career is still a very, very good player. He's extremely aggressive, and sometimes you can take advantage of that. But but he's a player though that, because you can take advantage of that, you don't always appreciate some of the things he does really, really well that very few people in this league can do. And so, I think Budda Baker is a solid A player in this league.
Oh, I love Budda Baker.
And I love the way he approaches the game. He's a smart player. And then they have the other kid, Jalen Thompson. They're kind of trying to figure out what's going to happen there on their other side of the safety and what they're asked to do. I think they're a B+ group. I really do. Like, if that was our safety group, I would feel great about it. If you put them on our team, I would feel very comfortable with and excited about that as our group, which then brings us to the 49ers, which is Jair Brown and ostensibly Malik Mustafa. That's a little bit up in the air, but we can only go off of what is expected, which is Malik Mustafa. I think Malik Mustafa had a really strong rookie year. And the arrow is only up for him. I mean, ton of range, major physicality, smart player, you could watch him learn and grow throughout the year, which was great. Jair Brown, I don't know how to grade him in this.
Yeah.
Because he struggled a lot last year now.
Or the downtick. Like, what are we doing?
Rookie year, a lot of uptick.
Yeah.
Last year, a lot of downtick. Now, in his defense, a lot of that was partially he was asked to play in a lot more space because we couldn't set an edge. And and that's what we've heard from different guys who've been, in the inside the 49ers building, said that they were constantly hearing complaints from players about not being able to set an edge and the issues that was causing on the defense. Specifically, Nick Bosa was very frustrated that across from him, they could not set an edge. And so when that was happening, we kept seeing it. Teams would run towards Leonard Floyd's side, and Jair Brown would then have to play in a ton of space because that side wasn't collapsed down. So I do think some of the struggles that we saw with him, I mean, some really bad missed tackles, really bad fills, really bad coverage gaffes, which again, some of that scheme. I mean, I will never understand why Nick Sorensen decided. Like, I understand the thought behind it and the philosophy behind it, but I will never understand why against the Vikings you are so dead set that you are trying so hard to fool Sam Darnold that you're going to end up putting a safety in man coverage on Justin Jefferson with Jair Brown as the double. Like you have two safeties covering Jefferson, and
Yeah.
it's a man one. Like I will never understand that. And so, like, I think that was the play. That was the play. It was very much like Steve Wilkes when we played the Vikings the year before. And he went and Wilkes decided he was going to, he outsmarted himself and decided he was going to go cover zero right before the half.
Yes, and we got
And,
burned. Yes.
and you get burned. Like, there's no reason to do
Yeah.
that. And you lose the game by 2 points. That it was like when you saw that was very much just a like a symbol of the defense that year, of that they just had weird calls at weird times.
Yeah.
Where like these defensive coaches were trying so hard to be so like I don't even know the right phrasing for it. Like they're trying to outsmart everybody or show they're getting too cute.
Well,
At the
Shanahan does
wrong
that
time.
sometimes. Shanahan does
And
that
and right,
sometimes.
and
Calling
Shanahan will
plays
do that times. Like
offensively, yeah.
I get it,
Which we're not
but
talking about offense. I'm just
right.
saying, yeah.
And so like you have that, and so I go, okay, some of that's on Jair Brown, but some of that's he was put in a lot of really bad spots, and he
So
wasn't put in a position to exceed. So all that to
all
say,
that,
I
yeah.
would say I would give the 49ers a B- for their safety group. I think right now, just because of that, Malik Mustafa is unproven and Jair Brown had struggled so much last year. I can't say that we have a better safety group than anybody else in the NFC West. When I look at the Cardinals, when I look when I look at the Seahawks and look at the Rams, I go, I think they have a more consistent safety group. We have more potential to go higher. I don't see the Seahawks and Rams getting over a B. Like, I don't think they have the potential to be better than a B group. The 49ers have a potential to be an A- group, I think. But they're not that right now. And so I can't give them that. So I'm gonna give them a B- as far as the safety group.
They got to prove themselves. It'll be fun to actually do this after like week 7 or 8, to be honest, and see
kind of
where we're
revisit
at.
it and see where we're at.
Yeah.
So that leads us to the final group, the cornerback group. The Rams, they got some young, feisty players that have shown some promise. I don't. These aren't household names. These aren't guys that you're gonna, be like, yeah, I'm so excited this guy can be, all pro next year.
He's just a guy.
I don't think. Yeah, they're guys. Kobe Durant and Darius Williams. I think they do well in that scheme. Very much a Nick Saban scheme there. With the Rams. Seahawks have Devin Witherspoon and Reek Woolen. Cardinals, Max Melton and Will Johnson. Cardinals are very much a rebuild. They're trying to figure out who's going to be their cornerback group. They don't even have anybody listed as starters. They haven't released their depth chart yet until preseason. So they don't even have an unofficial depth chart. But they're very much a work in progress. I'm going to give the Rams and the Seahawks both a B. I think, they're guys that have been able to succeed. But when I look at the Cardinals, I give that group a C+. I'm not impressed with that group. There's too much of a work in progress there. There's nothing that you could look at and point at and say, these are signs that it's going to be good next year. Yeah. I think scheme even helped them out. But those corners were a big reason why we've had success against them over the years. When we played the Cardinals, the first game against the Cardinals last year, we were tearing them up. Just moving the ball like crazy on him. And it was, the injury to our kicker that happens in that game, and then an unfortunate fumble and just things happening at the wrong times that led to us losing that game. But we're moving the ball easily through the air against them, even without Deebo Samuel. I don't think played in that game. That was a game that Brandon Ayuk, who had been silent almost the entire year, just had like 150 yards. And so, and George Kittle just went off in that game.
Yeah.
A lot of them were attacking their outside guys. And then, so with the 49ers, slot is a situation. It's kind of like safety. I don't know what to do with that with a lot of these teams, because it's kind of that 12 starter role.
Yeah. It's like a hybrid. Yeah.
But when we look at who the 49ers have as their top two guys, that's what I'm looking at with everybody else. You have Renardo Green and Giamador Lenore. I think I will say Adam jinxed us last show because
I
we
did
ended the
at the,
show
right at
and
the
he
end,
was
right
like,
at the end.
I can't wait for some breaking news. We're going to get something. We need some sort of news. And then that night,
And it was negative.
that Diamador Lenore was arrested for resisting a peace officer. Now, people have to understand a peace officer is not the same as a police officer. A peace officer is a guy who goes and is code enforcement. So he like gives people tickets for having their car parked too far off the street. And so there was something there, and he gave some lip to the guy. We'll find out what what happens with that. But as it stands right now, he's a week one starter. Renardo Green's a week one starter. Renardo Green, extremely strong rookie campaign. Very strong rookie campaign. Yep. Diamador Lenore, extremely strong performance last year. You know, when we look at Diamador Lenore, I think when you start looking around the league, he's in the conversation for being a top 10 corner, for maybe even being a top 5 corner in this league. And Renardo Green, when you look at some of the metrics against him, was a top 20 guy. So you look at the 49ers as a whole in this group, I would say this is a minimum an A- group. I think at minimum it's an A- group. So, and when you look at and consider that the 49ers, like the issues that we had with Jair Brown at safety, that the issues with the pass rush, the health issues in the linebacking core, the fact that this defense was still top 5 in passing yards allowed speaks to how good Diamador Lenore and Renardo Green were last year. So I think this group is an A group. I'm going to give them a solid A. And it sounds wild with some of the players we have. When you have a Fred Warner, when you have a Nick Bosa, to say that the strongest position group for the 49ers is neither of those, it's the cornerbacks.
Yeah.
When you look at those two guys, I think they're head and shoulders above the rest of the NFC West.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm so excited to see Green as he was a, rookie, and to see with Saleh, like that is, and the chat has been saying that, like, you pair all of these positive things that we're saying. Yes, overall there's some negative stuff that we're like, that we're unsure about. But out of all the positive things that we're saying, you add Robert Saleh to that. It is just like talking about the kind of ice cream sundae you're going to make and realizing you still haven't put the whipped cream or the cherry on top yet. You're just putting the caramel, figuring out what kind of ice cream you want. And then you're like, oh, I forgot. I still have some good stuff here. And it's like, guys, Robert Saleh is in the way that good quarterbacks can add 2 to 3 points per game to their, to the team. You look at like Aaron Rodgers going to the Steelers and what they had before. I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers score 2 more points per game than what they would have without Aaron Rodgers. Just saying. Well, under the same token, Robert Saleh, I don't know what we put on that, but is it maybe 2 to 3 points per game that we would give up less? I mean, guys, it's such huge, great news. I mean, I'm so excited for that. So, as we talk about defense, Johnny, are we putting the grades all together?
That's what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
I'm figuring out, where everything lines up. Just give me
Okay,
2 more seconds and we're going to do this.
remind everyone to make sure they hit the notification bell on this very channel. Be sure to take your phone up to someone wearing Niners gear, show them the channel, make sure they hit the notification bell so you can be notified when new content drops. Also, go ahead and do that on Sports Idiot Nation. We are coming next week at this time. We will be celebrating our 100th episode. And we started August 1st of last year, and we're 98 episodes in. So we come every Monday and Thursday. So check that out as well. Johnny, what do you got?
So final tally average grades. So when we average out the position groups, the way it works out, I may have been a little harsh on the Seahawks. I mean, when you consider that their defense last year ended
Screw them.
Well, their defense in a lot of metrics last year was, I think they were the best in the NFC West at the end of the season last year.
Screw
them. But they ended up being tied for third in in the NFC West. But honestly, when you look at it, I think how we grade this out and you look at it, you say, yeah, that sounds about right to me. The 49ers grade out as a B plus defense right now as it stands. We had a lot of issues last year, but when you look at the changes that they made on the defensive side of the ball, it's hard to look at this and say, they were, even with the issues last year, they were still a B ranked defense, or a B minus at worst. They weren't terrible in points allowed. They weren't terrible in yards. They were really good in yards allowed. They were really good in passing yards allowed. They were good in a number of metrics. They struggled in enough to where they weren't that great. They were like a B minus B defense. You look at the different changes, you go, this is going to be a B plus, I think, at worst defense. Really. It's hard to argue that this is going to be worse than a B plus defense. So the 49ers came in at a B plus. The Rams came in at a B. With a 3.0 GPA. The 49ers were at a 3.25 GPA. The Seahawks and Cardinals both tied at a 2.85 GPA, or a C plus. Or a B minus, C plus kind of range. I think that really fits in the B minus. A C plus would be 2.7.
Hold on, Johnny.
Seattle is the Ford Ranger of football. Look,
that is good. That is good, man.
A Ford Ranger. I'm not a Ford guy, but look, a Ford Ranger knows no payload limit. You can apparently you can tow anything with a Ford Ranger. I'm actually in a Facebook group. It's called Overloaded, where people post a lot of pictures of things, of trucks and different vehicles that have been overloaded. And one of the most common posts in there is a Ford Ranger. But yeah, Seattle, that's fair.
Funny.
No offense to anybody driving a Ford Ranger. A lot of
right. It's just funny.
It gets great. Funny is funny. It gets way better gas mileage than my Toyota. So
yeah.
But I do think that sorry, just the chat's getting me. Yeah. I do think that this grades out right. When I look at the personnel of Seattle and Arizona, their defensive personnel, I can't say that they're necessarily better than the Rams and with that defensive line. And when you look at the 49ers and the potential they have in the blue chip players of Renardo Green, Diamador Lenore, Nick Bosa, and Fred Warner, you cannot say that going into this season, you don't believe that they will be the best defense in the NFC West. It's really hard to make that argument when you look at those players. The fact that I don't see anybody of that caliber in any of the position groups on any of the teams. Maybe Jared Verse. Jared Verse might be, that might be up ahead of Renardo Green.
He's going to make a lot of money.
But when we look at Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Diamador Lenore, I think those three guys are above any other single defensive player on any of the teams. Maybe Budda Baker. Budda Baker's going to be right in there as well. Yeah. But I would still say that the way that Diamador Lenore played last year was better. And so I think the 49ers have three guys who are higher ranked talent than anybody else in the NFC West defensively. So that's what I think. And so when you look at this, I don't see how the 49ers you can't project that they have the best defense in the NFC West with the additions of Robert Saleh, with the blue chip talent they brought in the draft, with the trade for Bryce Huff. Like, this just starts looking like it can be a very strong defensive group. And you put that with the team that offensively, even with all the injuries last year, was still a very productive offensive group. This year looks so much better, and so much better in so many ways. So I think as we grade it out, the 49ers potentially have the best defense in the NFC West. And I don't think that's a homer take. Let me know in the chat. Do you think that's a homer take?
Yeah,
or do you think I'm being fair?
Well, I think the chat thinks we got people living in Ford Rangers. That's about it. We're on to the Ford Rangers. All right, keep moving. Keep moving. The chat is not helping. All right, Johnny.
They're all in on this Ford Rangers thing. I really hope we don't get like nailed with some sort of content thing by mentioning the Ofer Andre so much, but
we're gonna get a sponsorship deal from Chevy to be anti-Ford. Like, Chevy's gonna be like, oh, look at these guys. Now here's a guy.
Here's a guy. Anyways, so that's how it wraps up. I think next show we're going to look at the offensive side of the ball and do the same thing. Run it through, talk about the position groups, and see where does the 49ers' offense rank in the NFC West. That's going to be a really interesting one. I mean, just spoiler alert, I think it's going to come down to the Rams and the 49ers. Which position group how do they stack up against each other?
Tough.
And that's going to be tough. I mean,
Freeman and
there's a lot of good players offensively. So it's going to be an interesting year. Going to be interesting to see how everything shakes out, but definitely excited for the 49ers defense this year.
Hey, a couple reminders. We have, I say tongue in cheek, I say it in jest, but we have kind of like real football this very month. Okay.
Yeah.
Double check the stats, but July 31st is this month. It is the last day and it's a Thursday, and the Detroit Lions are playing. I don't even remember, but because I thought it was interesting that
not
Detroit,
us. That's all we know.
Yeah, Detroit gets the game in Canton, and they have never, because realistically, who even wants to see their third string players? But when they're that good of a team, now all of a sudden you got, so hey, July 31st, we have football coming, which leads us into August, and we're going strong. So we're excited. Again, be sure to take your phone, show it to someone who is wearing Niners gear, or just someone that's wearing red that you think is a Niners fan. I'll take that even. I would definitely do that, even in Indiana. Be sure to hit the notification bell, though, seriously, because you do want to be notified when we go live and when Johnny drops his videos. So we will plan for that on Friday then, Johnny, right, to do the offensive side like we talked about. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll be a lot more consistent from here on out. That June was a wild month for me. I have never in my, and this is not hyperbole in any way, I have never had a June as busy as I have been this June. It has been wild. I'm still recovering from it. That's why those couple days away were so helpful and much needed. So
no, I can attest to that.
It takes more days, but
I've been with you now through a couple Junes, and it's usually not like this. So no, I can attest to that as your humble co-host for sure on this. So yes, be sure, like I said, though, because of things like that, be sure to hit the notification bell, guys, and be sure to share the channel with other Niner faithful. So in the meantime and in between time, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, go Niners.